Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the fifth and last panel of the Amsterdam Center for European Studies Decolonizing Europe online series. My name is Beste İşleyen, and together with my colleague Tasnim Anwar, we are the conveners of this series. So today's topic is very timely and very important. So we will talk about decolonizing the curriculum. But before we introduce today's topic and our speakers, we want to also start with an announcement. We are deeply saddened by the news of Maria Lugones' passing yesterday. So Maria Lugones was a distinguished scholar in decolonial thought. She was a sociologist and a feminist philosopher who has made a significant contributions to the modernity coloniality debate. And she invited us to reread modernity and coloniality from a consciousness of race, gender, and sexuality. And her work focused on how coloniality disrupted gender relations and cosmological understandings of the communities and societies which Europe has intervened into. So we are very grateful to her for her scholarship, and may she rest in peace.
Yeah, so we start today's topic also with her in our remembrance, which I will now introduce. We are happy to have with us two distinguished scholars to discuss how to decolonize the curriculum. And this is the final session, online session that we have before the summer break. And it's going to be quite a practical hands-on session with two amazing colleagues who will share their reflections and experiences with decolonizing the curriculum. I'm very happy to introduce to you Dr. Rosalba Icaza, based in the International Institute of Social Studies at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Dr. Icaza is interested in the application of action research methodology in teaching research practices and committed to facilitating spaces for mutual learning and reflection within and outside academia. She also acted as a senior researcher at the Diversity Commission at our University of Amsterdam, and her work focuses on decolonial and feminist studies and methodologies. Welcome, Rosalba, we're very happy to have you. Our other distinguished panelist for today is Dr. Michael Onyebuchi Eze, who was a lecturer at the Department of Political Science at the University of Amsterdam. We're quite sad to see him leave to the University of Leiden, but we congratulate him on his new position. His research interests reflect an interdisciplinarity of history, philosophy, international relations, and transitional justice. And he has published and lectured widely on African philosophy, decolonial theory, methods, and critical race theory. Welcome both. We are really happy that you can be with us today. So we're going to discuss decolonizing the curriculum, and I just wanted to start with quite a broad question, but just to set the stage, and that is, what do we actually mean when we talk about the curriculum and decolonizing the curriculum? So maybe, Rosalba, can I invite you to reflect on this question first?
Yes, thank you very much. As you rightly indicated, our hearts are broken by the loss of Maria Lugones. So what I'm going to share with you today is very much informed by her practical thinking. She always invited us to think from what we do. And actually, she started her beautiful book on pilgrimages, reminding us that she never thinks what she doesn't do. So many of the things that I'm going to share are very much informed by this. And this is how I want to start this conversation, by actually speaking to you from where I'm thinking, what does it mean to decolonize the curricula? Because it's very easy to theorize about it, but for me, it's very important to recognize that what I have learned with decolonial and anti-racist activists within and outside academia, in collectivities, is central to address this question that you are posing to us. And also these networks are outside of the Anglosphere and of course outside of European frameworks of knowledge. So in order to address your question, I need to be very specific of that positionality, because we are not anymore asking what do we mean by decolonizing the curriculum. Actually, what we are asking in these collectivities is what for. What sort of learning, what sort of institutions, what is the meaning of knowledge, what kind of worlding do we envisage in the process of decolonizing the curricula. And why we are asking these questions? Because we depart from the idea of acknowledging that there are plural horizons of decolonization. Decolonization has meant so many things in so many different contexts. And what we have been doing is to learn from the experience of First Nations communities in resistance in Naviala, the so-called the Americas. And we have had the privilege of learning from Tok and Yang that, first of all, decolonization is not a metaphor, is not a proxy to improve what is wrong with education. We have learned that from them. But it's actually a means towards land restitution and historical reparations. And it is actually in their voices that we heard questions that actually confront the coloniality that is reproduced by institutions such as universities. Questions in which they are asking us in whose land universities were established, for example, or which lives are consumed to sustain science and research to this day. And on top of that, or probably parallel to that, the way I understand decolonization is very much related to their autonomy. Autonomy in terms of politics, economics, territorial autonomy, and of course epistemic autonomy that I have learned in conversations, in solidarity and in mobilizations with social movements in Latin America that have established their own universities, autonomous universities. This is the case of the university, land university of the Unitierra, as it is known in Chiapas and Oaxaca in the south of Mexico. And for me, it's very important because when the, let's say, the horizon of autonomy, it's keep present in how we understand decolonization, then we understand as well that issues of inclusion and recognition by state authorities or within state-run universities are not the only horizons of decolonization, that there are plenty of other horizons that have all to come into the conversation. Now, how this has informed my own understanding of decolonization in the context of Western Europe and Dutch academia is very specific. For us, within the decolonial conversation, decolonization of curricula means actually to make curricula very clear in terms of its positionality across the colonial debate. And practically this means that we are learning together in which ways a perspective, an author, a discipline, a whole field of research contributes and is complicit with the humanization of people of color and with the consumption of the life of Earth and of others. This is what for me means to decolonize the curricula. I hope that is clear.
Yes, thank you so much. That's beautifully and eloquently posed. Michael, could you also join in into this question, what it means for you and your where you come from?
Thank you. First off, I want to, because I don't know our audience, some people, just to make it clear, and I think it's important for me to situate this within a kind of, not a dictionary definition, but I try to make sense of what decolonization. So for those who are not familiar with decolonial theory and decolonization as a kind of an intellectual framework or tradition, so let me just use 2 minutes to just expand it so you know what I'm talking about when I say the word decolonization. So it's not a kind of a fancy, the word is not becoming a kind of a fancy intellectual currency, you know, helpful if you want to be kind of a card-carrying African studies scholar, or if you want to gain legitimation or visibility as a post-colonial studies juggernaut. So you want to be known or seen, you just tag yourself decolonization and then, yeah. But fundamentally, it focuses on knowledge production in universities. So when I use it here now, I'm not just speaking in broad sense because it can mean so many things. Different context changes it. But I mean, and I use it here in terms of the focus on knowledge production in universities, and how this is constitutively and substantively, you know, how the inside and outside approach is influenced by neoliberal temperaments or imperial temperaments. what shapes the knowledge that you produce in university, the decolonization. So this is what we're asking. When we do speak of this, why then do we speak about this? We do because knowledge is powerful, and depending on its legitimating procedures, that's what makes it become recognized. When we say that so thing is truth, then it becomes important to know who said it and why was it said. Because oftentimes, that even myth becomes a reality. What is normally constructed as a myth, depending on where it is produced, those things become a reality. So decolonization asks, who get to legitimate what is universally valid? What can we say is universally valid? Hence, when I speak here, I speak of decolonization, for lack of a better expression, is a space of rupture, of refusal and revolution. It's a space of rejection. It is a sphere of transformation and deconstruction. It is not merely about understanding the intellectual origins of ideas, but also grasp as well its lifespan, how ideas evolve over time, layers of mutations and transformations over time, because these are all involved. So and then this is how power is generated and truth becomes accepted as public truth. So this is just a kind of background. So then to respond to this question, it's rather unfortunate for me. I struggle with this to say, how do I frame it? And I have two ways to look at it. The first one is simplistic. I think it's very simplistic because we know knowledge is all about power, and with it comes legitimation. So what to know, when to know, where to know, and who decides what is to be known? And these are questions to be answered before we even begin thinking of decentering the curriculum. And I still remain very skeptical about going around the world, decolonization, especially here in Europe. For me, I'm still very cautious because of my own personality, where I'm standing. For me, it becomes an empty concept, So I look at it two ways, First, simplistic terms is the substantive aspect of it, content of what is taught in universities and how this continues to shape, and most importantly, legislate our understanding of the world, legislate and legitimate our understanding of the world. We are at University of Amsterdam or Cambridge or whatever. What is taught in those universities? How does it legislate and legitimate policies, whatever is shaped outside the world because of the power they have as universities? It is how what is taught. And the same breath gives legitimation to what has become known as universal truth. So this is the simplistic way to look at it. So everyone must subscribe to this universal truth. So we are saying, well, decolonize the curriculum so that people will know what is behind all those knowledge production and stuff like that. So it means to be recognized. Okay, when I'm pleading to be recognized, to be seen as a scholar, one has to live up to certain expectations. Decolonization then challenges that, The rest of the world becomes residual. So here, decolonization, one says, can help us to decenter this fixed and scripted abstract truths that are impartial to context. So this is what decolonization could. This is very simplistic response. Now, this is easy. This is okay. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Clap for me. Let's go home. But this is so simplistic because it takes it for granted. It gives so much power that even academics and institutions have so much power to actually decolonize the curriculum. And so this takes me back again to what I think is the most important question about decolonization of the curriculum, and which I think is more fundamental question before we begin to talk about decolonization of any curriculum or whatever is being studied. So we can't talk about this without talking about institutional hierarchies as they are. Hierarchies of power. So if we were to use the word decolonization, then the starting point is the institutions that fosters and enables this intellectual mindset. Why is that is the question, why is the knowledge produced? Who produces it? Why does it get legitimation at UvA or Cambridge or whatever the case may be, than if I go to Zimbabwe or if I go to Mali, oh, this professor from UvA, he wrote this, you must read him, oh, read him, he must be telling the truth. Oh, this guy from Nigeria, oh no, these people, See, institutions shaping power. So if we're to be honest about recentering or decolonizing curriculum, or for lack of a better term, sparingly using the word decolonization, then this institution is what we should be talking about. Decolonizing institution before we even talk about decolonizing the curriculum. For example, we're having this conversation because of maybe current anti-racist movement in the world today. So it becomes nice. Why didn't we have it 2 years ago? even 3 months ago. Why don't you have it like beginning of this year, you know? So it becomes a kind of, I become very kind of cynical, because for me, it becomes a kind of a reactionary discourse, you know, reactionary discourse, somewhat a moral displacement to inoculate against a moral outrage, an alibi against bad conscience. Oh, we did decolonization, check, we're in good shape. So what we need to decolonize, you know, refocus our institutions that produce these hierarchical structures, not what they produce. What they product, because what they produce is a product of supply and demand chain, you know. So here, in fairness, realism kicks in. You know, what to study, where to study is determined by capital purchase. I was in a faculty meeting somewhere in a university, and some professor was saying, well, this track should be suppressed because it doesn't bring us a lot of money into the university. We should promote this one because it brings money into the university. And so if it comes to a situation whereby even the faculty are already in a bloody rat and race mode of survival, how then do you talk about decolonization when their life is already dependent on availability of survival? So the question we should be asking is, how do we get our university to stop quantifying knowledge in terms of supply and demand? I think that's a fundamental question for me. The knowledge we produce is not free. We know that. It's not free, it cannot be free. It is colonized by terms of supply and demand. That's what it is. So because you have to move it away from there, unmask it, you know. And then for me, this for me is probably the starting point, because if this is not done, everything is just like footnotes. So we need to go back a bit and pull down the systems and see what remains.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Rosalba, as well, for providing us with your own stories about where you come from, and also touching upon important topics about positionality, universality, and the credibility of the researcher, depending on the institution where this person comes from, but also the politics of grant acquisition, the politics of citation, the politics of publishing. These are important topics that we need to consider when we discuss decolonizing the curriculum. But I also want to ask more specific questions about your areas of expertise and your field of teaching. Maybe can you please reflect on your areas of expertise or your areas of teaching, and where you have tried to decolonize the curriculum in this respect, and what potential fields or potentialities do you see in this direction? Rosalba?
Thank you. Well, again, I cannot start answering this question from nowhere. The way I address the work I do is always thinking that for people of color in higher education settings, such as here in the Netherlands, but all in other let's say westernized universities or experiences of westernized universities, these can be spaces that are or can potentially be liberatory, but that are also highly oppressive and dehumanizing. Because often our worlds of meaning, our affective and political relations are shattered within the walls of academia. Many of us can sense that, and this is sometimes what brings us together to have these conversations. Let me give you an example, and I hope that this makes sense in this conversation. My own grandmother never learned to properly grasp Spanish, and my mother only finished primary education back in Mexico. But this day, my own practices to decenter Europe in the curricula that I teach and that I have taught in other countries in Europe are very much informed by what I learned from them about the power of knowing. However, disciplinary thinking and the way we are trained in westernized universities have taught us well to disregard these experiences, these sort of contributions, these ways of being. And therefore my work, the research I do, the teaching I do, the mentorship that I try to do is very much concerned about remembering, reconnecting and reassembling knowledges that have been produced by the different disciplines where we come from as backward or inexistent. So somehow it's a kind of archaeology. but it's very much about healing colonial wounds. And for us, reflecting on this is very important. Not only on how we are doing this work, but also where are we doing this work, whom are we doing this work, and what for. So we are not doing this work alone. Constantly there is this journey for political coalitions that I think that is crucial if one aims to decenter Europe within, well, in the curricula and within a westernized context. And the other point is that in my work as a decolonial feminist, I'm very attentive to the ways we have learned to unlearn, especially modern subjectivities, our affectivities that are completely colonized by ways of being modern, by the myth of the individual subject. So, for example, we have been closely learning and monitoring the potentials, the learning potentials that emerge when we talk to each other about our academic training, which is based upon disciplinary thinking, and how we have come across with the starting points that are totally alien or abstract to us. For example, think about the image of White Christmas. That is a very key reference in Chimamanda Adichie, when she's speaking about the danger of the single story. So as scholars, geographically and epistemically located in Global South, we are learning to observe our own capacities to enter these non-familiar worlds of meaning, while we are inhabiting multiple realities that do not correspond in any way with these alien worlds of meaning. And take me wrong, this is particular consciousness that is a capacity to navigate these non-familiar worlds, but it's not a choice. I'm not talking about the empowered women who decided to do this. It emerges as Anzaldúa and María Lugones have always insisted, it emerges out of a necessity of surviving westernized context. And in the work I do, in the research I do, it expresses as a journey for connection with others. So this is, from my point of view, a crucial pedagogical opportunity. Because on one hand, it provides us with the consciousness of multiple realities, away from what Michael was also mentioning, provincial or local stories, to paraphrase Walter Mignolo, that are actually prescribed and universalized global designs of what is supposed to be learned and how, not only what or who, but how. But most importantly in my work, this consciousness grounds a capacity, enflesh sensual capacity that you can in your body, in your epidermis, to identify the limits of the concepts, frameworks of understandings, whole disciplinary frameworks that are very much grounded on something that I have already mentioned, on the dehumanization of women, like my mother and my grandmother, and that depend on the consumption of the life of earth and others. So in my work, these are the principles that I use to decenter Europe. And this is something that is reflected in my writings, but also in the pedagogical choices that I can speak a little bit about that in another question or another exchange.
Michael, do you want to?
On decentering Europe, right? The question on how my work reflects and practice on decentering Europe. Yeah, that's the question. Is I thought that I said to myself, well, it's not my duty actually to do research on decentering Europe or have a concrete or legitimate reflection on that. I think Europeans can do that job, and they can do it very well, more than I would do. Otherwise, I become afflicted with some disease I want to cure in the first place. I think it's good, but however, on practical terms, I am aware of my own background. I'm lucky because I've had the opportunity to have studied in and lived in over at least 20 countries in Africa. So that shapes my mentality and my idea. So it's already always comes into my own curriculum. And also my background is interdisciplinary. It also shapes me. So it's also an advantage. And I think history, being a historian, also gives me a ton of that is a smaller edge too. And so when I do my courses, I'm also aware, first of all, being a historian of idea, that everything is contestable. Origin of ideas, how ideas shape, how ideas influence. Earlier on, I mentioned the origin of myth, how myth becomes a reality and how it is regularized. So in my classes, I try to bring this out, that look, even that which is, we know that this is not true, can be regularized as public goods. Let's assume example, sadly, my own president in the past, these people are rapists, these people are rapists, these people are rapists. It's a myth. Soon enough, it becomes a reality. People begin to feel in it, people begin to work with it and stuff like that. So it's a myth that becomes a reality for the people, giving meaning to the people because they believe in it. So we need to be aware of these tendencies, these transitions in knowledge, that no knowledge is completely free. And no knowledge is, can be said, well, there's no power play embedded in it and stuff like that. So I am very reluctant to say a lot about here, because decentering Europe, I don't think I'm decentering. I think I'm trying to engage with Europe. So here, wonderful. But I'm trying to engage, but look, there's other stories. It's not just one provincialized European epistemology. Look, there's also different frames of thinking that could be in dialogue with Europe. So I think Europe could keep their own business, and then, but give space for other forms of knowledge to engage in dialogue on equal terms and stuff like that. Otherwise, a Kinyarwanda saying, this is the Kinyarwanda saying, say that in African proverb, knowledge is the only thing that grows when it is shared. So the only decentering I would mention is that understand that epistemic incest does not help anybody. Epistemic incest. So because knowledge becomes incestuous, it's going to die, it's not going to be strong. So open it up. Open the window for fresh air. It will be good for you. It will be strong. If the window is open, it's healthy. Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. That's also so beautifully said. And I just wanted to follow up in that sense, and maybe ask two questions in one, if that's okay. So the question is twofold, and I would like to invite you both to reflect practically, like in very practical steps, what can academics do to decolonize the curriculum, taking in mind the things that you have said, that decolonizing is not a hollow term, but an embodied, effective practice that we do as researchers, and in that sense also encompasses the intersectionality of the oppressions and our identities as researchers. So just to take these two questions actually as one big question: how can we do this as embodied practice university? So Rosalba, can I invite you please to first reflect?
That is a very big question. Basically, the way I connect or go back to what we learned in 2016 conducting the Diversity Commission report chaired by Professor Gloria Becker was the combination of intersectionality and decoloniality was a very productive one in terms of the knowledge outcomes and outputs, but also in terms of the learnings that we could obtain. Not because we were bringing marginalized perspectives into the evaluation of one of the oldest universities in Europe, but because we from there could propose a series of recommendations that are actually combining these two perspectives. And if decoloniality helps us to understand how, something that Michael has already mentioned, how the university knowledge production practices are reinforcing monocultural perspectives at the expense of the plurality of knowledges, the vastness of the plurality of the world. Intersectionality gave us the possibility of understanding that distinct social positions of individual students and staff determine how they experience the university. So we had these two levels analysis and these two perspectives in mind to think about then how can we propose different set of measures and policies, and you can read them in the report. They are there. In terms of my own practice in ISS, I have really taken these two approaches seriously. And when you send us these questions, I really take the time to think, okay, how this expressed in my today teaching in ISS. And most of you probably know ISS, the 90% of our students are students like me, coming from the Global South. Most of them are African. So for me, it's probably a very important grounding for having these kind of conversations in which I have learned fantastic things. But in terms of how to decolonize the curriculum in an institution that teaches development studies, some of the ideas that I have put into practice in courses is precisely what Michael was saying. It's not about stop teaching Europe. It's about opening traditions of critical thinking, which are based in the experience, in the local or in the local European experience, also considering that Europe is plural, but that are based in the plural, complex history of Europe, to literatures, perspectives, and cosmovisions coming from the so-called Global South. So it's about the dialogue, and it's an practices that can open monocultural approaches to knowledge that are very much related to Eurocentrism, of what you have already been discussing in previous sessions of this series of conversations. This is one. The second, the second practical thing that I can now come across is that point of departures matter. This is something that I started with. We are not speaking from nowhere. The way we approach a particular set of authors in our reading list, it's very important. And I think that is a pedagogical opportunity to have these discussions with the students of why we're choosing the authors that we are choosing and why a dialogue. The task of listening to non-normative voices within the university is also central. This is something that came as a clear indication in the research that we conducted in UvA, and I think that it applies everywhere. We should, as mentors, as teachers, constantly being asking ourselves whose ideas have been taken seriously. There is this fantastic teacher, her name is Defina Lazarus Stewart, and she has been helping us to understand this shift from, let's say, diversity to social justice in terms of thinking, curricula, and pedagogical practices. And something that inspires me very much is one of the questions she's posing to teachers like me and like others within the university. She's asking us to seriously considering the following: whose safety is being sacrificed and minimized to allow others to be comfortable, maintaining dehumanizing views. I think that if we take seriously this invitation to think, then it's inevitable that the task of listening to non-normative voices is central in any task of the centering Europe and establish, let's say, a dialogue with critical and deconstructive traditions in Europe, which I do in my classroom. And of course, I think that in the social sciences, at least, we have dedicated a lot, is great, a lot of attention to decolonizing research methodologies. There is still a lot that can be done in relation to decolonizing our pedagogies. And this is where I think that we require much more time, space, reflection, inviting others to develop different approaches, not only to what we are teaching, but how we are teaching it. I think that for me it's essential that we are constantly challenging not only hierarchies, not only the means through which validation of what knowledge we produce, but also how we produce that knowledge in the classroom. And for that, well, there are different interventions that I have been engaging with to develop pedagogies that also emerged from the research in Amsterdam: pedagogies of relationality, pedagogies of positionality, pedagogies of transition, to actually bring the street into the classroom, to actually erode as much as is possible in the context of, let's say, European capital as Amsterdam, or in the case The Hague, erode the epistemic border between the classroom and society. This is something that I'm investing a lot. And yeah, that requires a lot of time, but this is something that I'm fired to do in the context in which I'm based right now.
Thank you so much, and it's really inspiring to hear that. And yeah, we thank you for the contribution. Michael, could you briefly follow up on this?
Yes, I think you have to briefly because I need to give our audience time to ask questions. So I think I need to cut off everything I wanted to say and just say one or two things. I'll leave everything else out. Um, I will leave intersectionality out. There's so many things to say there, but I can only say that it's an important framework we should think about. It's very necessary. The criticism of intersectionality has been its ambiguity and concrete application. And I say it is not true. The only thing I can say is that no, it speaks about a standpoint perspective. So what intersectionality does is that it gives a standpoint perspective, standpoint. So standpoint is actually what you could use to neutralize the often, I think it's often criticism of intersectionality, or it is very ambiguous, it's very vague, it's very ambiguous on concrete application. No, it is not. It is stand for, and then it pays attention to history, the context. So you see that this is what you have an observation as true, that's context. So context, context is intersectionality is context, and it changes everything. Now, what practical steps? It's very impossible or difficult to say about practical steps for me. I want to speak of intellectual revolution because talking about practical steps is okay, trying to treat the symptom and not the disease. Okay, this is a symptom of headache, take quinine or whatever. So it seems to me that instead of going for a symptom, maybe we have to rethink again, what does the university mean in the 21st century? What does it mean what does it mean in a 21st century? In my classes, I look at the larger picture and everything is contested and contestable, in my class. My students know that. And we have to be conscious of our own biases, mindsets, and formations, our own background, and how what we think is truth might actually be a myth, and how this myth inform our reality, of what we teach and what to teach or want to teach, stuff like that, our own mindset and biases when we do these things, so where are we coming from, and so on and so forth. Second, let's talk about the agent, the teacher. Talk about the professor. Talk about the professor here. Why would I supervise a doctoral student who, for example, works on a sophist movement in Senegal or Algeria, whatever, without engaging with local actors in Senegal or Algeria, to co-supervise such a thesis? Why wouldn't I do that? What then is my legitimation? I have a PhD student or whatever. I'm a professor. Oh, I can do it. Okay, I just go there and ask you questions. But why can't I get somebody who is in Senegal or Algeria to engage with me to provide this PhD student? As academics, I think we often have chips on our shoulders coming from European universities. And interacting with other scholars or institutions not located in Europe, we are either paternalistic or curiously colonialist. Where we engage with them only to appropriate their own whatever they give us as ours. So kind of, anthropological notebook. Oh, what do you have to say about this? And stuff like that. So this is not talking about decolonizing the mind, the agent as well. Not just the institution, but we ourselves as teachers, as agents of decolonization. How do we decolonize ourselves, The legitimation of our efforts is dependent on this, I think, intersubjective ethical engagement. Ultimately, it is epistemic humility we are looking for here. If we want to talk about decolonizing the curriculum, also decolonizing the agents and hierarchies, we also foster without thinking about it, without even knowing about it, being conscious of that. So it is not practical step, but a paradigm shift. What is the question? What have we been teaching? What is the problem we want to solve? What is the question? What is the problem we want to solve? What solutions do we anticipate? How has this worked in the past? Is it a wrong question with right solutions? Right questions with wrong solutions? Wrong questions and wrong solutions? Wrong, and keep matching it on and on and on. Keep asking those questions. And in Kosa Zulu proverb will say, "Umuntu ngumuntu gabantu." Motoke batoke bato. For me, that is actually from African political theory, an intellectual frame that also informs my own intellectual development. It means a person is a person for other people. My students already know. There's no way I can finish a talk without talking about Ubuntu philosophy, Ubuntu Boto. A person is a person for other people. That even as knowledge, as I said earlier, knowledge is a gift. We share with it. It's a gift. It's not something to be hoard. Don't hoard it. Don't hoard it. Open it. Aggiornamento, the Italians, open the window and stuff like that. So decolonization here becomes not just about the curriculum, but also the agent. As we ourselves, it's easy to speak about, what they do here and here. But we academics, European academics, what is the engagement with other universities not located in Europe? What's the relationship with them? Paternalistic, or what I call curiously colonialist. You go to them to appropriate knowledge from them and write your big book in Cambridge and then go and make a lot of money and then you send them maybe $100 or $200. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, wonderful, wonderful, have a nice day. And perpetuate the same kind of epistemic injustice. So that for me is actually institutional decolonizing ourselves, beginning from ourselves and stuff like that. So this will be the practical steps, questions, important, ourselves, and remove the chips on our shoulders. We don't have it all. Somebody from Timbuktu might probably teach us one or two things about Kant. Maybe we'll learn differently from that. Okay, thank you. I suppose this was the last question, yeah.
Yeah, thank you both. I mean, I really, really enjoyed the conversation and there are a lot of questions coming, so I want to switch to the Q&A round by starting with a question by Shirin Assa, specifically to Michael. Can you perhaps ask Professor Eze to elaborate more on the commodity of knowledge and how it is controlled by the demand and supply ratio? Would you say that apart from decolonizing the knowledge, the capitalization of knowledge is an inevitable part of colonizing the knowledge? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I think the person actually brilliantly put it well, better than I would have framed it. Yes, you can't talk about decolonizing knowledge without talking about the capitalization of knowledge, because you go to university, what universities are in crisis now. Why are they in crisis? Because they couldn't get since COVID, they couldn't get their elite students from Africa, or Asia or some other third world to fill in the gap so that they can boost the resource of the university and stuff like that, because they depend on enrollment. And when they depend on enrollments, okay, what can we teach that people want? So you say demand and supply then determines what is to be taught. And then, of course, don't forget about the review. Review when you finish teaching. So actually, you are at the mercy of demand and supply by the end of the day. So yes, I agree with you that connected to the colonization of knowledge is also capitalization of knowledge, but let's push it a little bit more. Commodification of knowledge. Commodification of knowledge. So it's a commodity. It's something we buy and stuff like that. So it's very, very, so yes, I agree with you. They go together, and to decolonize, we also have to speak the aspect of capitalization of knowledge. Because if we don't remove it, then, as I said earlier, then we can speak as much grammar as we want. They will not, the universities will not change. They're not going to change. It's okay, thank you. We had this conference. Okay, good. You see, we did it. Okay, move on. Who is going to bring us a lot of students? You come and teach. We don't care about the other person. Yeah.
Well, we are overwhelmed by the questions. Thank you for your questions. We are struggling to choose among them, and thank you for your interest. It really, really shows us how important these debates are. And we are very sorry that we will not give justice to all the questions and all the statements that you make. But maybe another question we choose from the Q&A box.
Yeah. So. I have here an interesting question that is about the language in relation to decolonizing, and I think it's a fair question that we talked about before in this series. So the question is, what do you think about the role of language in epistemic injustice and the dominance of academia in Europe and North America? English is the main language in academia, with some people even being told not to use sources that are not English. How do we challenge this? Maybe Rosalba, could you start reflecting on this question?
Well, yeah, this is central. No, that's what I also mentioned in the beginning. From where are we thinking decolonization? Because even if we stay in the Anglosphere, then our references and our way of addressing decolonization of curricula is going to be very much circumscribed to a particular way of discussing what is the university, what is the meaning of knowledge, etc., etc. Actually, one of the most inspiring feminists I have recently read is Sarah, and she came at some point to ISS to give a fantastic talk about the abolitionist perspective on universities. And one of the questions was exactly this. Okay, what can we think about language? And something that she shared with us, and that I have also shared very much in the collectives which I'm part of, is that every language is, of course, a world. And how the attempts to abolish, let's say, modern subjectivities, affectivities, the myths that Michael is referring in relation to, for example, individuals as the point of departure for feminists to where we need to start thinking about transformation, has to go through cases a very active politics of knowledge, of going back to non-sources of speaking to each other to understand those cosmovisions, ways of understanding personhood, but also ways in which we can actually cultivate knowledge between each other. Also, the question of the proverbs that Michael has brought here, it's so important. In every single class that I teach in ISS, I normally say to my students, okay, don't forget that this is an English translation of a particular text, or that actually I could be, sharing with you fantastic thought on, I don't know, sexuality, transformation, the subject, the issues they talk about from, let's say, Maya Cachiquel. But unfortunately, we cannot access this knowledge in its own, in its own original root. We need to access it into Spanish, already a colonial language, and then we need to access it into another colonial translation in English. Why I'm constantly saying that? I think that this is another pedagogical opportunity to also humbling myself as speaker of only colonial languages, but also to really project in the classroom the vastness of the knowledge that we are not incapable, and that to really even starting to imagine, and how important is to have that sense of not being able to consume those knowledges and to get lost. This is so important in the of the European University, I think so. In all the settings, it will be another conversation, but in the context of the classroom in which I'm based right now in Europe, it's so important, I think so.
Michael, do you want to reply to this? You are muted, Michael.
Okay, are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I think just a few comments. I think what you said, what Fanon just keep ringing in my head. He said that if you want to have access to people, you have to speak their language. Language is the window of culture and a lot of things going on. And many things get lost in translation, actually. And how words are used also can shape a lot of meaning and stuff like that. One of my friends did a translation of Frantz Fanon. Well, she read a work of Frantz Fanon. And then we found out that the translation is actually different from if you read the original text and stuff like that. And she did an excellent work in pointing out these kind of weaknesses. And so, yes, language is very, very important. Language we use, and it shapes a lot of things. It shapes a lot. So I don't think I have much to say there because I think you did a good job there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's really important, and also something that came up previously in this series. So I'm very happy that this question was asked and how you reflected both on it. Unfortunately, we only have time for one more question, and there's an excellent question about resistance, which is also a topic that was initially included in our conversation as well. So I do want to bring the attention back to that. And that is, how much freedom do you both have in the places where you work in challenging the Eurocentrism in knowledge production, and what problems are you facing, if any? And it really relates to some of the kind of frequently heard objections that exist in the department towards making the effort and start to think differently about curricula. So I would like to invite you to talk a little bit about that resistance and that hesitation that people do not want to engage with these different forms of epistemology and acknowledging the politics of knowledge production. Rosalba, can I invite you first to reflect on this?
Well, it's a very important question. I think that there are waves of, let's say, waves of engagement in which one can aspire to be free as much as the confined institution and the disciplinary frameworks in which we work allow us. Is not real freedom in that sense. It's a freedom that is already given by the terms of the conversation in which we are actually based upon, and these are the terms of the conversations set by academia, disciplinary speaking, but also disciplinary frameworks, sorry, but also in terms of institutional frameworks. What I have learned from the coalitions which I'm part of is this maneuvering. There are moments in which a politics of engagement is crucial in order to liberate the changes for others in precarious positions needed to. So this is the moment to have interventions and to really engage in order to facilitate all the women, all the people of color, which are challenged by the institution. The problems are very enormous because you can easily desperate in the attempt of disengagement, and in other moments there are very concrete moments in which the strategy that I have followed and that I have also learned in the coalitions I'm part of is the politics of invisibility. There are moments in which you are in the institution, but you have to remain invisible to the eyes of power in order to, ideas, sensibilities, ways of working that are very, very incipient, but that have this potential of creating togetherness, of creating political responses. And that is something that I don't know how to teach to anybody, something that I have learned from other powerful women that I have the privilege of know, and that for me is very important to keep constantly myself aware of that. There is a moment for a politics of engagement, and there is a moment of a politics of invisibility. This is what I can say in relation to this question.
Thank you so much for that. Michael, can I give the final word to you on this topic?
Yeah, thank you. By the way, I forgot to mention too that in African studies, we also lost a very important decolonial scholar, Professor Ernest Wambadambia. He's a very important scholar in African decolonial school. He also died yesterday, so it's also a sad memory. And yeah, I should have mentioned it at the beginning. I'm still very sad. Any Africanist in decolonial field will also know him very well. He made a lot of contribution. Also, indigenous epistemologies in dialogue with the Western world, and then he's not essentialist, always looking for discursive approach towards engagement with other traditions of knowledge. Now, back to the question, in terms of engagement and resistance, I think this is a kind of a subtle question because, as I mentioned earlier, it's a location of space and freedom, area of emphasis or the emphasis of interest. I wouldn't say that is a kind of active resistance to say you don't teach this, but the resistance becomes manifest in when they say, well, these courses cannot be taught anymore, or we assign this class to somebody else, or maybe it's not really important and stuff like that. They're not really, cannot say that this is actually because they wouldn't do, opposition will not come like that. It will come in that kind of a policy decision and stuff like that, which is very, very unfortunate. That is very, very unfortunate because then we lose many opportunities for kind of a creative adaptation is what I'm looking for. Maybe with time, creative adaptation, how do we go back again to what we have as policy? Okay, how do we engage everybody? And so here I make a hypothesis. Decolonization, we're talking about decolonization. But then after decolonization, what do we have? What do we have? And this is where I'm speaking of, I like to use a new term, cultural reclamation. I use cultural reclamation to make a case that yes, decolonization is good, but in order not to be just a dead-end project, we need to fill in it so that it doesn't become just archival, so some archival knowledge, but beyond that, okay, what do we move, what do we fit it in? And it's, well, historical experience and relations, questions of migrations, you know, a lot of things. So to think about about the curriculum to fit into the contemporary circumstances and times. Not just every now and then, every few years, something big happens and we just begin a reactionary discourse, okay, reactionary seminar, whatever, to respond to that. And after that, we close our files and move away. But being honest about this, dialogue about this, and engaging the whole world and comment about it, and also knowing that we don't have all the answers. We should open up for different knowledge systems because that's the only way we can improve and engage. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you both for your generous contributions to all these questions. But maybe I say a few words about some of the things that both of our speakers have mentioned. Michael, you were very right in terms of saying that these are very topical issues right now, and people are also using this opportunity to be part of these debates. And maybe in 1 year or 2 years, we will see scholars publishing maybe edited volumes or special issues, and we will see names who never engaged with these debates before, but all of a sudden they want to be part of these debates. And I think we need to also be aware of these things. But we also need to acknowledge that these are enabled by the institutional and material capabilities and also possibilities that these researchers have, right? Being in a particular institutions gives them more institutional and material, let's say, resources to be part of these debates. But what about all these scholars? We had this issue about the language, but we can talk about other material conditions of possibility, like doing fieldwork or going to a conference. Even the visa regime is such an important thing to consider for us, who is part of the debate and who can contribute to these debates. And this is something that we need to take into account, that there are many scholars around the world who have been producing this knowledge for decades, but maybe whose voices have not been heard up until now. But maybe in 2 or 3 years, they will still be slow in terms of making their voices heard. So we need to acknowledge these hierarchies of knowledge production, in terms of global South, global North relations. And also, Rosalba, you mentioned about the validation of some of the courses and the curriculum debates, and I think these are also very important. And I also have to say that the validation of these series, for instance, when we started with this, we received a lot of support from our colleagues, but we also had some challenges in terms of validating why these series are important. We had like 5 sessions for 1 hour, 5 hours, let's say, in total. But if you consider the work behind this in terms of talking to people and saying why it matters, it's not only about contacting people and inviting them to contribute to the series, but really making, in our institutional field, making clear why this series is important and getting support. It requires so much labor also on our side. And saying this, I want to thank the co-leaders of the team of the Europe in the World team of the Amsterdam Center for European Studies, Dr. Virginie Mamadou and Dr. Dimitris Pouris, who were supporting us from the beginning, and also the ACES management team, Lisa Saris and Gijs van der Starre. They have been very supportive, and they have been their contribution, their support have been tremendous in terms of making this happen. So I also wanted to finish with some reflection on how we started and how this series came into being. As I said, we received a lot of good questions, and we will do our best to pass these questions to our speakers. Unfortunately, we have reached the end of our time. So we want to conclude this session with a big thank you to the speakers for their time and for their generous contributions. Thank you for being with us. So this is the last series before the summer break, but the big interest in the series that we see has further motivated us. So we will reconvene after the summer. We are already putting together a great program covering different topics about infrastructure, transportation, decolonizing art. So if you want to be updated about the events, subscribe to the newsletter of the Amsterdam Center for European Studies, follow us on Twitter to be updated about what is next to come. And saying this, yeah, we want to thank you for being with us, and we wish you a wonderful afternoon.